constructed, and maintained to ensure public safety and minimize environmental impacts. We greatly appreciate all the work you do at the local level. We hope we can provide some information during these next webinars that answer questions you have faced regarding small pond design, construction, and maintenance. What we hope to do over the next 3 sessions is start with the basics and build to a more detailed level as we go from session 1 through to session 3. We don't expect to be able to cover all the technical details that we want to discuss in just 3 sessions. We hope this is the start to something more regular, perhaps leading to a standing committee that regularly meets to discuss small pond and dam issues. By the way, for those of you who are interested, this slide shows a picture of an HOA-owned Twin Lakes Upper Pond in Calvert County. And if you look closely, you can see a large void in the dam caused by the resident muskrat. So as most of you know, the Maryland Department of the Environment is required by state law to perform a review of local stormwater management programs at a minimum once every 3 years. Environmental Article Section 4-206 says the department shall periodically, but at least once every 3 years, inspect and review the stormwater management programs of the counties and municipalities and their field implementation. So during the planning for this year's review of the Central Maryland counties, we were also discussing the many issues we are seeing in Maryland with small ponds and dams, both with design, construction, inspection, and maintenance. So we decided to focus this year's stormwater management program reviews on small pond issues and broaden the discussion statewide. So first, let's begin with some basic terminology. What is the universe of ponds? We have small ponds, we have dams, we have ponds, we have embankments. The regulations use the term impoundment. We have jurisdictional dams and non-jurisdictional dams. What does all this mean? Do these terms all mean the same thing? We are often having discussions at MDE about the terms small pond and dam. We see a lot of confusion with designers and with the terms small pond, dam, and pond, and our regulations and design manuals are not helping. Just last week, we were discussing internally how to distinguish between these terms. This is how our discussion went. Small ponds. Small ponds are our little dams. Dams. Dams are bigger than small ponds. Ponds. The stuff smaller than small ponds are still called ponds. But don't all ponds have dams? Maybe we should call small ponds small dams. Even in our stormwater management design manual, our big BMPs are small ponds. The bottom line is we as an industry need to fix this confusion. We sent out a survey to you to obtain information on the policies, design criteria, and construction and maintenance practices of small ponds in your jurisdiction. And in order to not take too much of your time, we had to limit the number of questions in the survey. So what we expect to gather is a snapshot of your local programs. So now, so far, we have received 24 responses from 15 local jurisdictions. Thank you for those of you who have responded. What did these surveys tell us so far? Well, among other things, these surveys have indicated that for most of you responding, multiple agencies are involved at the local level in stormwater management and small pond approval. Therefore, communication between local agencies and with MDE is very important. A variety of you have local geographical issues facing you and require adaptation of design criteria. And very little change has been made to design requirements in consideration of climate change, but at least 5 of jurisdictions have done something. There is a general need across the state for updated Maryland Code 378 training, and only about 58% of you are familiar with Dam Safety Division's new criteria. Obviously, MDE needs to do a better job disseminating the information. So what is the best way for MDE to notify you of any new design guidelines? So why are we here today? We all have one thing in common. We work to ensure the safety of small ponds and dams in Maryland. And we do this by ensuring designs meet minimum standards and proper construction methods are followed. Why is this important? Well, we know that dam failures don't just happen in California or Michigan or in other parts of the world, or only to very large structures. This slide is a list of failures and near failures in Maryland since 1999. There have been 29 near failures or failures in Maryland in 21 years, and not all have occurred due to hurricanes. There have been at least 45 dam failures or near failures in Maryland since the department began maintaining records on dams in the 1930s. Some of these incidents required the evacuation of downstream residents and property owners. Fortunately, there has been no loss of life. But many of these dam failures cause costly damage to public and private roads, public and private property, and the environment. Here's one example, Loveton Farms Stormwater Management Pond. The Loveton Farms Regional Stormwater Management Facility breached on May 5th, 1989 in Baltimore County during a summer rainstorm. Seepage formed along the downstream slope of the embankment due to piping, and at the time of the breach, the water level was below the elevation of the principal spillway, but higher than in any previous occasion. A portion of the spillway conduit was carried downstream along with a portion of the embankment soils. Another example, this slide shows the Preference Estates Pond after it failed. This HOA-owned small pond dam failed in December 2011 during a heavy rainfall event of 10 inches. This failure occurred just a few months after this dam survived Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee. And then the Stubbs Farm. The Stubbs Farm Dam located in Kent County failed during Hurricane Floyd when over 10 inches of rain fell in September of 1999 and destroyed the new aluminum weir spillway and eroded the dam embankment. On July 14, 2016, the Barron Mill Dam overtopped during a locally heavy rainstorm and failed while our dam safety inspector was on site. Within 6 hours of the start of failure, the breach opening was 90 feet wide. In September 2016, the Big Mill Pond Dam in Worcester County failed during a locally heavy rainfall event. The Ryawakan Pond Dam failed in 2016 due to overtopping after 5 to 9 inches of rain fell in 8 hours. And then 2 years later, after an emergency repair, the dam overtopped again when 8 inches of rain fell in 2 to 3 hours from Hurricane Michael. And we cannot forget Cascade Lake in Carroll County. This 100-year-old dam overtopped in July 2018 after a heavy rainfall event. And while trying to stabilize the dam and lower the lake levels, the dam nearly overtopped a week later after another heavy rainfall event. Carroll County spent tens of thousands of dollars to pump the lake over a 2-week period in order to lower the water level so dam removal could proceed safely. Last year, the Frederick Community Fellowship Church Pond in Frederick County overtopped during heavy rain and nearly failed. The result was a large head cut on the downstream slope of the dam. These white PVC pipes are siphons installed by the owner to lower the water level as a first attempt to reduce failure risk. The owner of this pond ultimately decided to construct an engineered breach to remove the hazard. And then just last month, in August, the dam at the Running Hare Vineyard in St. Mary's County overtopped and nearly failed during Hurricane Isaias. And we know many small ponds have failed also over the years, although we do not have good information on how many or where they have occurred. Is anyone documenting these failures? Do we know how many have occurred? Do we know why these failures have occurred? We estimate there are over 15,000 known small ponds in the state. What is the status and the condition of these small ponds in your local jurisdiction? And how can we reduce the potential for failure? So what is facing us as an industry? What hurdles do we have to overcome? Clearly, climate change is an issue facing us, but what other things must we consider that put additional pressure on us to make this work? There's a loss of historical knowledge, the laws and regulations and manuals that need updating. We have a growing industry of aging infrastructure. There's a tremendous focus on pond retrofits as our MS4 permittees work to achieve impervious acre restoration. Again, climate change, changes to the amount of and intensity of rainfall, and the impact it has on conveyance. All of these hurdles will require collaboration and teamwork. And consider this. We stopped requiring flood control large quantity control ponds in Maryland in 2000. For the past 10 years, the focus has been on small ESD practices. We are losing the expertise of those with knowledge of Maryland Pond Code 378, and in particular, how the standard was developed. How do we transfer this expert knowledge? To be sure that the designers of today can interpret the criteria. There are gray areas with Pond Code 378, and as with any criteria, we need to understand what it is based on in order to make judgment calls on how to apply it. Speaking of design manuals and regulations, just look at these dates. The Maryland Pond Code 378 has not been updated since 2000. I know, time flies, right? I feel like it was only yesterday when MDE came up with the 2000 design manual, but it has been almost 20 years. 20 years since the pond design criteria listed in the Maryland Stormwater Design Manual has been updated. Who can tell me when the last time the dam safety regulations were updated? That's right, we are still using dam safety regulations that were last updated in 1978. MDE was not even created until 1987, so these regulations are older than MDE. So we've got to ask ourselves, are the design criteria in these documents still appropriate? Okay, yes, those are problems, but what's the big deal? Well, I've been with the Maryland Department of Environment for almost 7 years, and during this time, we have seen the number of regulated dams in our state increased by over 100. That's a rate of about 15 per year. Many of these dams were designed as small ponds, but due to hazard creep or inappropriate hazard classification, they are now considered regulated dams by MDE. Do you know that Maryland has more than 626 regulated dams? And while none of them are as large as or hazardous as the Oroville Dam, more than half of them have the potential to cause significant hazard to human life, major highways, or homes. And it is not always because they're in poor condition. As we know, our dams are a critical component of Maryland's water infrastructure. They provide flood control, water storage, recreation, and management of stormwater runoff, but they do pose downstream flood risk that must be managed. Currently, many of Maryland's dams and small ponds are over 50 years old and at a risk of the typical deterioration that comes with aging infrastructure. Managing the risk from dams means ensuring necessary resources for routine inspection and maintenance, as well as up-to-date emergency action plans to quickly warn first responders and residents are available. Does anyone recognize the Maryland Dam in this photo? This is a picture of Greenbelt Lake taken in 1936. And if you look closely, you can see President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The president was inspecting the dam and the 24-acre lake during his official inspection trip through Greenbelt, a model community planned by the Suburban Division of the United States Resettlement Administration. The universe of ponds and dams is large and complex. Just the terminology is a hornet's nest to decipher. There are so many approval agencies involved, and it is difficult to know what direction to go. And each agency at the state and local level has different objectives in what they are trying to accomplish. And sometimes these goals and objectives lead to conflicting design criteria. And sometimes it is difficult for the design community to understand what to do, when, and where. This leaves our customers, the dam owners and designers, frustrated and confused. I bet if I pulled the audience, I would get several different answers to these questions. For example, what is meant by the height of the dam? Or when is a culvert a dam? With so many agencies involved in the process, there are many different interpretations of Maryland Pond Code 378 requirements. And many are not fully knowledgeable of MDE's role, and MDE does not have a full understanding of how the responsibilities are handled at the county and district level. For example, Who is approving MS4 restoration work? And who ensures the MS4 inspection repair requirements are implemented? And who is evaluating hazard creep? And small ponds and dams are not going away. The number of small ponds and dams in Maryland will only increase as we build more ponds to address local flooding and retrofit existing ponds to meet the Chesapeake Bay TMDL restoration requirements. 38% of constructed and proposed restoration BMPs are upland practices such as wetlands, ponds, and local jurisdictions have spent $1.5 billion cumulatively on these retrofit projects. So who's going to pay to continue to maintain this infrastructure? Many of the owners of this infrastructure are local jurisdictions, spending a lot of money building new ponds and retrofitting existing ponds. How many of you have the knowledge of the many recent urban flooding events in Maryland? Who can forget the recent flooding in Ellicott City, Catonsville, Clear Spring, Frederick, Baltimore, and Montgomery County? Just last week, there was significant flooding for 2 major state roads due to a heavy rainfall event. As we face more extreme weather patterns, ensuring our dams and small ponds are in good condition, have adequate capacity, and where applicable, emergency action plans, that we factor in the impact of climate change is a priority for Maryland and should be for all of us. Let's look at the facts. The 2017 North Atlantic hurricane season had 17 named storms. In 2018, we had our first hurricane in March. In 2018, Maryland saw record precipitation, 72 inches of rain in Maryland. And in 2019, July was the hottest month in the world since the 1890s. What does this mean for small pond designs? Should we be designing for a different storm event? What about urban flooding and stormwater conveyance? Should we be designing our stormwater conveyance systems for a different storm event? All of these questions and issues point to the need for us to work as a team. Teamwork and communications will be the key to our success. We have to be on the same page. We are all in this together. There are no stupid questions to meet the challenges of the future. We must all move forward together. Okay, that's the end of this part of the presentation.